Look, my guest today, Ryan Deiss, is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, one of the most sought-after and dynamic speakers on marketing in the entire world. He's the founder and CEO of the Scalable Company, a scale-up accelerator based out of Austin, Texas. He's also the founder and CEO of digitalmarketer.com, the founder of recess.io, is also the host and founder of Traffic and Conversion Summit, one of the largest digital marketing conversion conferences in North America. And if you haven't gone, you should 100% attend that. He has introduced and popularized many of the digital selling strategies that modern companies now take for granted. He's been called the godfather of digital marketing, the GOAT of digital marketing. Either way, whatever you want to call him, you're in for a treat. Ryan, welcome back. Thank you so much for doing this.
Jason, thanks for having me back.
Always good to have you on and to speak to you. And I learned so much from you. But I want to really provide tons of value in this episode. I think you're the man that could do it. So I want to start off, let's go deep. You talked a lot about being a 10X marketer, right? You've talked a lot about that. What does that look like? What's a 10X marketer?
Yeah, so I think a 10X marketer is someone who combines both the tactical aspects of modern marketing with the more foundational, fundamental, call it old school practices. So in really simple terms, a 10X marketer is someone who knows copywriting and they know the technical side of things. And in most cases, these two worlds, certainly historically, these two worlds lived in very different parts of the marketing spectrum. They would sit in different parts of the offices. They didn't really talk to one another. And what we saw with the rise of digital is we saw copywriters, people who understood direct response practices, who kind of came on and had a good initial presence. They wrote long form sales letters, things converted, kind of in that first phase of the internet and of online selling. But they didn't really learn the new channels and the new technology. They didn't understand how copywriting would change in a social type environment, for example, how email changes. And then you have the growth hackers, the people who are almost digital first in their marketing, who understand the quant side of things. They understand analytics and split testing. They know how to make amazing spreadsheets and to model stuff out, but very often they don't understand how to write just really compelling hooks and offers. So I believe a 10X marketer is somebody who combines those two things together.
I totally agree. I think, look, as a paid media guy myself, I think I've been good, and the success I've had is not because I'm the most technical. It's because I understood holistic marketing and how it played in a bigger role. And like you always say, if you could craft a good sales offer, all these things become a lot easier. And I never really fell into the hacks and tactics. I always found hacks or tactics without a strategy is just kind of like running wild pretty much. But really just understanding marketing holistically, I think you refer to it as a T-shaped marketer. Maybe talk about what does a T-shaped marketer look like and why it's so important to be a T-shaped marketer.
Yeah, and just giving credit where credit's due. I think I first heard about that concept from Brian Balfour, who was one of the marketing leaders at HubSpot back in the day, now runs a company called Reforge. And I think he actually heard about it from someone else. So I'm not taking credit for the concept, but I am doing my best to popularize it, because sort of what we had early on is generalist one, right? Again, let's go back to the very late 90s and throughout the early 2000s. If you knew a little bit about everything because everybody else knew nothing, you won. And so if you were a generalist, if you could combine some basic marketing skills with some basic foundational marketing skills with some basic technical skills, just generally, if you could build a website and click send on an email, you won. So in the early days was the days of the generalist, the rise of the generalist. Then what we saw was this flight to specialization. And that's where, you think about it in kind of the 2010s and teens. That's when you saw really the emergence of search engine optimization as a profession, right? You saw SEO, companies really emerge. And SEO was a thing before, but it really emerged as a profession. Same with inbound marketing, right? People were like, I'm an inbound marketer. I'm a content marketer. I'm a social media marketer. People identified by their specialization. Even I'm a customer CRO, customer my gosh.
Retention?
No, basically conversion rate optimization. Wow. Conversion rate optimization. I went really stupid there for a while. My apologies. Yeah, no, CRO, conversion rate optimization, was a big thing, a dedicated, practice. And if you, at the time, if you weren't a specialist, then you weren't getting jobs because people were looking for one thing in particular. Well, now where we are is we kind of come full circle, but not full circle. We've kind of come semicircle. And now what is winning is the generalizing specialist. And so what is a generalizing specialist? A generalizing specialist is somebody who is a specialist in one area. So think about that as kind of the vertical of the T, but they know a little bit about everything so they can be functional. And that's the horizontal of the T. So you go deep in everything. So the idea of, I'm really good at search, but yeah, I don't really know anything about social or paid. It's going to be tough. Like if you want to hold yourself out as a specialist, then you better know some generalists. You better kind of get in a good solid community. You got to know a little bit about everything so that you can interact with everyone else. And so today, yeah, you got to choose your vertical. You got to choose your specialty, but you still have to learn enough about everything else to understand how it fits together. Because the reality is it all fits together. The days of arguing over, organic versus paid, what's better? Yes. The answer is yes. You want both. And in a business, it's like, we don't spend any money on advertising. All of ours comes from organic. Well, that's adorable, but you're leaving lots of money on the table, and a competitor is going to come along who does both, and they're going to kick the crap out of you. So, today it's the generalizing specialist, and another way to say that is a T-shaped marketer.
And it goes also further, right? Like people who sit there and say, well, I want to know, is Google responsible for the sale? Is Facebook responsible for the sale? Is email marketing responsible for the sale? And the answer is, like you said, yes.
So you're getting into attribution, right? And attribution is one of those things that has puzzled marketers, forever. I know.
Well, none of these platforms play nicely with each other, so that's one of the biggest reasons.
No, and they all take credit for everybody else's sales, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of attribution, and I want each and every channel to be accountable. It sounds really good, but I've never really seen it pulled off in practice. Not at scale. Not when you're getting into really big, scale. What gets credit? Is it the first cookie? Is it the last cookie? I've even seen people go in and do weighted averaging. So we're going to give the first cookie, 30% and the last one 50%, and then distribute the other ones and try to come up with these complex formulations. I had a friend of mine who was responsible for just hundreds of millions of dollars a month in ad spend. And they had all these PhDs, writing equations and formulas to figure this stuff out. And they never really got a whole lot better than stick my thumb up in the air and see which one wins. And so, yeah, again, it comes down to everything, needing to understand everything, trying to track. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't track and that you shouldn't do, any budget allocation, but generally what you're from an attribution perspective, but generally you're saying it looks like the bulk of the sales are coming from Instagram versus Google. So let's just give Instagram more budget. And it is a bit of a judgment call. And that's, again, as a marketer, you've got to know enough, and you can't be so just dogmatic about, no, it's got to be social or it's got to be search, because then you're going to over attribute to that channel because it's your preferred specialty channel. Can do that.
And some platforms you got to be okay with maybe losing money to drive them to acquire them on another platform. So trying to attribute it, you would then cut that platform out because it doesn't seem profitable in your eyes, but it's leading towards, it's the setup man for most of your sales.
Yeah. I mean, it's like saying, why on earth do I keep, buying drinks and taking people out to dinner? It's not going anywhere like that night. Like I'm only going to hang out with people who will sleep with me on a first date. Like, it's not a good strategy. Granted, I've been, happily married to the same woman for going on 18 years now. So, maybe if you're not pursuing monogamy, you don't want to take relationship advice from me. But if you are pursuing marketing success, I highly recommend investing in the relationship. I highly recommend dating. I highly recommend going first. I highly recommend, spending, even though it isn't necessarily paying off today. Because you're building the brand, you're building the relationship, you're building your pixeled audience. You're doing all these things that are going to pay off in the end.
The problem is relationships aren't measurable, right? So like you talk a lot about that, scaling things that aren't measurable. How important is that to really grow a brand?
It's essential, but I'll acknowledge that it's hard. And so what I tell people is, look, if you're dealing with a fixed budget, if you're a startup and you're like, I've got $1,000 a month to spend, and that needs to bring back at least $1,000 a month, or I don't eat. I get that. If that's the case, then you're going to go with everything, with all the channels that are going to pay off and they're going to be accountable within a 30-day period. You can float it on a credit card and that's it. But at some point, as you begin to scale and as you begin to grow and as you begin to just become more successful and accumulate more cash, what I tell people is start with 80-20. Okay, take 20% of that ad budget and put it towards non-accountable things that you believe are going to build a relationship. You know, you're a human. You know what people like. You know what you like, unless you're just a total delusional, narcissistic sociopath, right? You generally know what nice people like, and they like good content, right? They like watching something that's really valuable. So maybe, you know, you put out something that's a really amazingly great, awesome piece of content, but nobody's going to find it on their own. Maybe you say, you know what, I gotta, you know, we're now generating enough to where I can spend $2,000. I'm going to take 400 of that. I'm going to take 20% of that ad budget, and I'm going to direct it towards paid ads to this content. Very subtle call to action. I don't expect to generate any revenue, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for the next 60, 90 days. And we're just going to see what happens. Invariably, what happens is all of your other campaigns just magically become more effective. Your email rates go up. Your acquisition numbers go down. You're watching your, pixeled audiences and your custom audiences begin to grow. And, as you scale, you're still maintaining good, solid conversion rates. You don't know why, but you can generally assume maybe it's because I was nice and went first, right? Maybe it's because I bought them dinner, right? As that grows, and as you increase your budget, now change it to 50-50. Now, as your budget increases, don't keep it to 80-20. Say, I'm going to take 50% and move it over here and have 50% be towards direct response. Now what you're doing is you're beginning to overinvest and do that until you can go from 80-20, 80% to the accountable direct response. This is going to pay off in 60 days or less. And 20%, this is more relational. We'll hope that it pays off at some point. If you can flip that to 80-20 the other way, where 80% of your investment is going towards building a brand, that's truly when you're building a brand. That's when you're building a brand that can have value, that can be sustainable, that can exist without you, that somebody's going to want to come along and perhaps pay you a lot of money for one day.
And you said it perfectly. We're human, right? We understand that there's also tons of touch points along the way that you need to invest in the relationship. And we all know how we consume. How come it's so hard for business owners to then, remember they're human, and they throw all that out the window and they can't comprehend that fact, and they won't market like that?
Well, I think it comes from a place of fear, and it comes from a place of scarcity, or maybe even a place of greed in some cases. Sometimes if you're starving to death, you steal bread. So I'm empathetic because I've been there. I've been in that position where it's like, I have $500 left on this credit card, and I need to turn this $500 into something more than $500. I was not thinking about building a relationship in that moment. And so I'm sympathetic to the people who are starting there. I'm less sympathetic if you're experiencing success and you're not reinvesting in your brand and you're not reinvesting in your customer. What you're doing is I think about it in terms of relational equity, and you think about it in terms of a bank account, right? So you've got a relational equity account with all of your customers, with your market, with your audience as a whole. Every time you ask for the order, every time you ask them for something, you are making a withdrawal from that account. And that's fine as long as you have adequate funds on deposit. But if you're never making new deposits into that account, if you're never giving value,
it's like, who are you?
Well, at some point your account's going to run to zero. And just like at your bank account, if you just withdraw and never make a deposit, eventually it's going to go to zero. If you go to that bank and you demand that they give you money and you're at a zero, that's called stealing. That's the definition of bank robbery. So I think a lot of people are doing that with their customers, and they're wondering why. But I'll tell you, in the moment, you come out with a hot offer, you're a new brand, you're new and you're exciting and people are talking about you. You get that relational equity built. I see this a lot with launches. Like somebody goes and they launch a new product, especially if it's done with affiliates or referrals, right? So somebody comes onto the market, lots of people talk about them, whether it's affiliates or referral partners or maybe the press. And then they do a big launch, they do a big sale, they ask for a lot of money and people give it to them. What they were actually doing in that moment is they were taking a loan on the relational equity that all of those other people, whether it's the affiliates or the press, they're taking a loan on that relational equity. That was not their relational equity. If they don't bring it back, then you get to do it once. And that's where you have a lot of one-hit wonders. That's where you have a lot of fly-by-night. But I'll admit that it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. And making that pivot from take to, okay, I need to give. Sometimes greed just gets the better of people. Sometimes fear gets the better of people. But the people that win long-term are the ones that invest in relationships.
Well put, and I love the analogy with the bank account. I want to talk about something that other people are sleeping on, but yet you're so bullish on, right? We know email statistically is the channel with the highest ROI, right? Just from what I've seen, I'll let you weigh in and tell me if I'm wrong. Why are you so bullish on it right now, and especially at a time where like most people say email's dead?
Yeah, I think the demise of email has been predicted for over 15 years. I mean, really, like it is. People have been declaring every year as the year that email was going to die. Social was going to kill it.
It's the cockroach of marketing.
Exactly. It's cockroach marketing. You just can't kill it. So social was supposed to kill it. Facebook was going to kill it. Slack was going to kill it. Millennials, everybody's like, millennials don't use email anymore. The reality is it's still a phenomenal channel for communication. It is. I mean, you think about it, it's the digital version. It's of the terrestrial letter, which was proven for, ages past. It worked. So it's never going to go away. And if anything, what's happening right now is it's experiencing a renaissance, and it's experiencing a renaissance with the very audience, millennials, who people declared were going to kill it. And the reason is because millennials, graduated, got jobs, and they all got email accounts. So now they all use email, right? And it's still the first thing that most people check. But the reason I think that email is seeing this resurgence is a couple of things. Number one, it is perfectly built from mobile, right? You think about the experience of an email. Reading an email on your phone is actually quite a delightful experience. It's built for it. It's single column usually. And I'm talking about like emails that look more like the types of emails you send, not like this over-designed newsletter kind of thing, but just emails by their very form factor fit well into mobile. And so given that so many people are reading their emails on their phone, it was built for it. Also, it's not a new app that you have to learn. With social, I got to learn this new app. Okay, Snapchat, Instagram has stories. I got to figure that out, right? There's always things to learn. Only everybody at this point knows how to use email. You've got an app, it's there. It's the one that you click. But the other reason I think that people are flocking back to email, in particular for information, is when you read an email, you get something that you don't get anywhere else online. And that is the satisfaction of finishing. If you think about your social feed, it is scroll, 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 scroll. It's just an endless scroll. It's literally perpetual scroll. When you get to the bottom of an email, you're at the bottom. You're done. Nothing else in digital marketing offers that. This idea of a margin, this idea of a sense of completion. So I think a lot of people, where we're overwhelmed with information, you're seeing people flock back to email because, I understand what it is. It's simple. I know what I'm going to get. I get to the bottom and I'm done. I can archive it. It's all built in there. And so we're just seeing actually email open rates. As long as we're putting content in the inbox, we're seeing email open rates back at levels that we hadn't seen for, half a dozen years. So yeah, email is doing really, really well right now. Whole companies are emerging that are just email only products, whether it's the Hustle or the Skim or Morning Brew. There's a lot of products and a lot of things happening right now in and around email, whole businesses to support the reemergence of email and email newsletters in particular. You want to look at Substack.com. Substack is essentially Shopify for email newsletters. And they're crushing it right now. You're talking about a company that launched in like 2018, 2019 to facilitate better email newsletters. If they'd have tried to launch that 10 years ago, everybody would have laughed at them. People wanted blog platforms and those kind of things. So I think that's a good sign that it's, that the email is here to stay.
Before we go deeper on that, are blogs dead?
No, I don't think, but we need to define what a blog is. So the traditional blog, remember, blog is short for weblog. And so it was designed to be almost a diary style format where the most recent information is at the top, and then the information that is older just gets pushed down to the bottom. So it's a format that was very time specific. It's current stuff is here, old stuff is here, the most relevant stuff is on top. That's not really the way that most content that you're leveraging from a marketing perspective. Like there's a place for I want to be new, I want to be current, but that's a difficult game to play online. It can be suitable for social, but even that, there's an exhaustion factor to like, I've always got to have the new. I've always got to be putting out new, fresh, updated content. The content marketing that's most effective from an asset perspective is the content that's evergreen, that you put it out there and people come to it, and you need to go back and update it. So I prefer, and that's the type of content that we generally like to produce. We're not going to break news at any of our companies. We're going to produce helpful content that'll be evergreen, that'll be searchable. That's something that Jimmy Daly, who is head of marketing at a company called The Animals, it's Animals with a Z, animals.co, I think. Really good content marketing agency. He's got a piece that he published that was really on library versus kind of publication content. And really, I think most blogs, to throw up the air quotes, should function more like searchable libraries and less like the traditional weblog format where new stuff's at the top, old stuff's at the bottom. So I do think that blogging for the purposes of producing content on a regular basis is good. Saying that I'm going to blog regularly and I'm going to have my readers that are going to come back and they're going to read my stuff, they just don't. If that's what you want to do, you're better off to send an email newsletter, push it right into the app they're opening first thing every morning, as opposed to hoping they come to your website every day.
So let's go deeper on email, because I think you're the man to pick the brain on this topic. How do people do it better? How do people get good at email marketing? What are some great tips you have in order for that? And I think it's a two-part question, because you're going to give all these great tips, but then the next person is going to sit there and say, well, that's great, I don't have anyone on my list. So the next part is, how do you grow your list?
Which one do you want me to answer first?
We can do it with, let's start with how to grow your list. So we'll go in order of what it takes.
Yeah, so to grow your list, you need one amazing piece of content, one truly outstanding, amazing piece of content that people are willing to trade their email address and some of their attention for. And so list building has not changed since I started working. My very first job was at an email marketing company in 1999. That's how I got into all this stuff. And back then, they were working with big clients like InStyle Magazine and trying to build these companies' email lists. And they found the only thing that worked was like the good old fashioned gated PDF, right? So whether you gate content in the form of a PDF or whether you gate content in the form of, but it's a video on the other side, maybe it's just a list, maybe it's a blog post that you've gated, that's fine as well. The medium through which the content, the premium gated content is delivered, we've seen time and time again is irrelevant. It just needs to be something that somebody wants. So some type of tool, checklist, example, swipe file, reports are okay, but something really tangible and tactical. If you have something that somebody wants, they will opt in, they will give their name and email address, for them. And you simply say, when you get this, you'll also be subscribed to our newsletter and to our list, right? So that's how you build your list. Now, how do you get people to that page? You have to advertise. You're either going to go out there and scurry around and hustle, or you're going to buy ads to that page. And people are like, oh, but buy ads to the page, how am I going to monetize it? At first, you're not, and it might cost you $5 per subscriber. So are you willing to spend $5,000 to build a 1,000-person subscriber list? If you had a list of 1,000 customers, 1,000 like really solid prospects, could you make at least $5,000 in an acceptable period of time? If the answer is yes, that's how you build the list. One amazing lead magnet, commit to mailing them at least once a week after that with some additional good follow-on relevant content, whether you produce it or whether it's more curated. But one amazing piece of content, and then you buy ads. Expect to spend around $5, maybe a little less in some markets, maybe a little more in others, per lead. Goal of generating 1,000 opt-ins, because once you've got 1,000, Now you've got enough to where it should produce some regular income for you. But that's the risk. That's how you build a list. Welcome to business. It's going to require an investment.
But I love it how everything still comes back to stage one, right? Awareness. And
Yeah.
so many people want to ignore that stage and just like it's mind-boggling. And some people just try to skip that stage and be like, here, I have this product. Everyone should come to it.
Yeah, no, right. And what they'll do is they'll spend an enormous amount of time producing a lot of content on their blog back to before in the hopes that people find it, the hopes that they then opt in. And now they're 60, 90, 180 days into this plan and they've got 100 something subscribers. I don't know. I'd rather just bust my tail for 3 months to make $5,000 if I've got to mow a bunch of lawns or whatever. I mean, I've been a broke kid and I've figured out a way to make, a few $1,000s to buy a car. I mean, I did that. So somebody's like, oh, I can't possibly do that. Cry me a river. And I did that while I was a full-time student. So I don't know. I just, people are like, I can't possibly. It's like, then don't. More room for those who will. You can shortcut it. If you've got friends, if you've got people who have a list and they'll do you a solid and give you a mention, that's fine. That's helpful. I'll tell you, once you've built one, so we've got digitalmarketer.com. We're going to be launching a new, brand new media property at scalable.co. It's all for like founders and entrepreneurs who want to scale their business. Well, we've got a lot of those people on the digital marketer list. So we'll email that list and tell them about that one. We'll build a 50,000 person list pretty quickly. We get to kind of cheat because we already got one. Media will birth media. But in general, if you're just getting started, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay for attention or you're going to have to earn it. Earning it takes longer and at the end of the day costs more. So that's how you build the list. In terms of how do you, so the second question was
really, so they have the list now. Everything's great. They invested in it. What's a great email strategy? How many times should they be emailing? What does content have to look like?
Yeah, so your highest open rates and your new subscribers will be most excited the first day they sign up. That's when they will absolutely positively be the most excited. Their excitement level will drop in half. The next day, it'll be 10% on day 3. And on day 4 or 5, they'll completely forget who you are and mark you as spam. It's amazing how fleeting and ephemeral this just a brand can be at that stage. So you need to make sure that when they opt in, that very first email they get, if it's just thanks for subscribing, you missed a huge opportunity. So you need to make sure that welcome email offers them some really, really, really good stuff. So maybe it's, go check this out. Here are the things that we do. Invite, especially in the early days, invite follow-on conversation. So what caused you to sign up? What's going on in your world that made you do this? How can I help? Reply to this email and have that email actually go to you. You can change it later. When you get so many people like, oh, but then I'm going to get overwhelmed. You realize what a good problem that is to have, right? So do it until you get overwhelmed and then change it. But up until then, you're going to find that you've got a lot of opportunities. So optimizing that first welcome email to where people go, whoa, this is cool. I need to make sure I open everything that this person sends me. And so that first email is going to be really, really, really critical. Have something come in the next day. A lot of folks, they'll be worried about emailing too often. When you have a new subscriber, I would email them once a day for at least the first 3 days, because you need that frequency in the early days or they'll forget about you. In fact, I would email them once a day for the first 5 days, but I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can't do that. Beyond that, you need to email once a week, or again, they'll forget about you. So you need that frequency in the beginning, and it's got to be good stuff. They've got to be glad that you opened. They've got to look forward, to receiving the emails. And when it comes to email performance after that, subject lines are critical, but what everybody forgets about is the variable that plays the biggest role on open rate and readership, and then ultimately click-through rate. And never forget, by the way, the job of an email is to get a click when you're talking about marketing. You're not selling in the email. So an email gets the click and its work is kind of done. That's like, well done, good and faithful servant, right? So it has to get opened, it has to get read, and then ultimately it has to get clicked on. Well, getting the click has everything to do with the copy that you write and the offer that you write. That's basic copywriting. And frankly, if you get it opened and you get it read, getting the click is a piece of cake. Getting it opened is the hard part. And I mean opened with intent to read, not, oh crap, I accidentally clicked on that. I mean open with intent to read. Subject line matters. Subject line will impact open rates dramatically. But open rate with intent to read is actually driven more by the from field than it is by the subject line. And you know this. They're the people who you love the most in your life. They could send you an email tomorrow and you would open it if it had no subject line. Because you're like, I know that person. That's my mom, right? Your mom emails you, you're opening the freaking email.
Except if it's a bunch of forwarded emails like she always does. But
well, there is that aspect of it, yeah. But you know, if it's your best friend in the world, right, who you just love to death and hadn't heard from in a while, you see that, you're opening it. That's brand, right? That is brand. There are some emails that I get where if I see that person's name or I see that brand in my inbox, boom, I'm clicking on it. Because every time I open it, it's really good stuff. There are others that if I see it, I'm like, ugh, and it doesn't really matter what the subject line is. I'm archiving it and wondering, why don't I just unsubscribe? So the from field actually plays a bigger role than just about anything else. Subject line definitely will help, but consistently writing subject lines that are so compelling so as to get people to open, even if they don't know who it's from, is tough. And even if you get it opened, doesn't mean they're going to read, and certainly doesn't mean they're going to click. So it comes back to brand, where we all sort of started.
So if you're a brand, should you be sending the email out as a brand, or should you be sending it as Jason from this?
When you're first getting started, it's easier to build a brand and a relationship if you're a human face than if you're a brand, right? So with digital marketer, everything was Ryan Deiss. That was what was in there. Then ultimately it became, Ryan at digital marketer or Ryan Deiss -DM, tested a bunch of different formats. So you kind of get the hybrid, which if your name is short enough and your company name is short enough, I would start there, because now you got two. Because there's some people where some brands are like, I love their content, I love their stuff, but the emails will just come from individuals and I don't know them, and it's like, I'll archive it because I don't think anything of it. And then, I open it at random. I'm like, oh yeah, god dang, I need to figure out a way to denote this because I love their stuff. So I would look to do both if you're looking to establish a brand. Eventually, like now we've measured it. We can mail from digital marketer and we can mail from Ryan Deiss, and the open rates are about the same. But that took years of transitioning and transferring like personal brand authority onto a logo. It can be done. And I would argue it should be done if you ever want to be anything other than the product. But you can't assume that. But to start there, to start from a brand without a face, really difficult, really painful. I mean, even Apple had Steve Jobs. It's just about any great brand that you know about, that you care about. There is a face there alongside it all the time, and just the founder's personality, spokesperson's personality was imbued upon that brand enough.
Well, that's okay, right? You talk a lot about being the face of the company versus being the company, right?
Yeah, you should be the spokesperson for your company.
Shifting gears for a second, when it comes to selling online, there's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things people throw out, like real world sales tactics, for example. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when it comes to selling online?
It falls on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I see people who let's think about just like websites and the way different websites are structured. You go to their website and right at the top, it's like, buy my stuff. Right at the top, it's like, opt in for this thing. I don't even know who you are yet. So I see on one side, there's people who are asking for way too much, way too quickly, proposing marriage on a first date, right? They're not acknowledging where they are in the sequence of the relationship with the person who is there. And this is why landing pages are so important, right? Because if a landing page, if you have a separate landing page from your homepage, you know what drove them there. You can generally figure out how well they know your brand, what their needs are, how to speak to them. Homepages are tough, for that reason. But on the flip side, I see lots of homepages that don't say anything at all. It's like this kind of cryptic messaging. I see marketing that doesn't ever make an offer. I see content marketers and social people who They're just like give, content, 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 and they never make an offer. They never ask for anything, and they get stuck in the friend zone. And when they do come out, there's a really well-known, he's almost kind of gone now. But this was somebody who kind of in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, if I said this person's name and you were in marketing there, you knew this person's name. This person was speaking at every marketing event, getting really big keynote fees, very well-known blogger, some of the first on Facebook and Twitter, just crushing life, and did this for years. And then he decided, you know what, I'm going to do a course and I'm going to ask my audience for money. And oh my gosh, this person, you would have thought that he basically said, I've decided, you know, to like start my own cult and we're going to, you know, sacrifice puppies to some alien god that I've come up with. I mean, you would have thought he just made the most sickening, disgusting thing. His audience completely turned on him because he hadn't ever established that, you know, this is a relationship, but relationships go both ways. And he never recovered from that. Like emotionally, he never recovered from that. Fundamentally retired. Last I checked was, you know, working in the mortgage industry or real estate industry. And it's a shame because it's really, 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 not that there's anything wrong with that, but, you know, this was somebody who was on top of the world. And so I see these two things. So what both of these come down to is marketers misunderstanding the importance of sequence. It's why you've referenced it a bunch of times. You know, a digital marketer, we're big on the customer value journey. You've got to map that value journey. How do you generate awareness and engagement? Get them to subscribe, get them to that convert stage, excited to send, you know, begin to advocate and ultimately promote. So whether you look at our customer value journey or another just customer journey or funnel, make sure that you have it mapped out and that you're speaking to the person, not based on, you know, what you think they need, but based on where they are within that journey.
So marrying sales and email, for example, does every email need a call to action?
I think every email should have a call to action. Should that call to action be click here to buy something? No. I think, let's say I'm going to send out a pure content email. I still would say like, hey, if you liked this, tell me what you thought, reply. Because otherwise I just kind of walked by, yelled, and then kept going. That's not a conversation. So I think if you're not always encouraging some type of action, then why did you send it? We're not poets. And even poets, really, when you write poetry, they're trying to make you feel something. But we're not entertainers. It's not I'm going to sing you a song and cause you to, you know, feel something. Marketing is persuasion. And we persuade people in the hopes that they will take some action at some point. So a call to action, yes. A call to action that necessarily results in a sale, no. But it should be something that'll further the relationship.
With the pandemic going on and so many people pivoting and trying to adapt and trying to now be even more present online, let's get a little bit tactical for them. What are some of the biggest do's and don'ts for digital marketing?
I think number one, it's read the room. You know, and that's not just the pandemic. I mean, if you look at what's going on right now with all the racial inequality, that it's obviously, it's always been here, but has really been thrust into the forefront. This is just a really sensitive time, right? A lot of people are on edge for very good reasons, right? And anybody who isn't a little bit on edge is, I don't know, you know, you're either way stronger than I am or super delusional. But so I think reading the room is important and making sure that you're matching your offers to what's going on. I remember it was, I think it was Friday the 13th. It was March the 13th was when really just kind of everything, it was clear that like, okay, COVID-19 we have to act. That was the day that at Digital Marketer, we sent everybody home. We're like, take your stuff. We're gonna be working remote. It was later on that evening when like the NBA got shut down and everything happened. Well, we had some emails queued up for an offer that we were due to send out. This is an offer that had been on the books for over 60 days. You know, we plan on offers out well in advance. And the email, the subject line was, you know, have you heard the bad news or something like that? And it had to do with how we were removing some of our certifications from a level of membership that we had at Digital Marketer, which outside of the context of what's going on, that would be bad news if you're not already a member. These are coming out. This is your last chance to sign up if you want to get it, right? Very normal, innocuous, legitimate,
innocent at the time
promotion, completely innocent at the time. Sending an email the Monday after essentially the Western world, the United States at least, completely shut down. Have you heard the bad news? And the bad news isn't the fact that we're now dealing with a global pandemic that's killing people and destroying whole world economies. It's nope, we're taking some of our certifications out of our membership. Thankfully, we caught it. And stopped that mail before it was sent. It's not like we queued it up that day.
But have you thought about what if it would have went out, what the response would have been from Digital Marketer? Have you ever even gone down that thought process?
Oh yeah, well, I still had to respond because over the weekend, we sent out some emails along the same lines, again, that were already queued up. They weren't that bad, but I basically had to come out and say, I'm really, really sorry. We had some emails that were queued up. They weren't really appropriate. So yeah, I know exactly what I would have done because I did it, which is acknowledge the mistake, explain what happened, apologize for it, and talk about how we're going to do it better next time. So yeah, freaking apologize. Don't without making an excuse to be like, yeah, we freaking screwed up. So yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I did do. But we realized that we have to stop. We have to take this 1 week at a time. And so I think the first thing is just make sure you're reading the room and seeing what's going on. In the midst of, Billy Jean Shaw, I don't know if you know Billy. You do. Yeah. So he's one of our, he's a friend. He is one of our faculty members. He's a digital marketer faculty member. So he comes out and teaches classes and workshops for us. And we had queued up, this last week, promoting Billy's workshop. Now, if you don't know Billy's African-American. Billy's a black guy. It even says so on his license plate. I'm black, right? Now, we didn't have that queued up with the plans of sending that out as a tribute and wanting to highlight African-American marketers. That had literally again been on the calendar for well over a month. But what we realized is if we send this out, it can look like we're pandering. It can look like we're being insensitive. It can look like we're trying to profiteer off of this. So in this case, we actually pulled that promotion, right? And had to let Billy know, I know we're planning on doing this. We're not. Here's why. We'll come back to it later. Let's do it. But it could go so many different directions. And so we just didn't mail anything that day. And so I think you just have to, again, be human, and you've got to look at what's going on. And the mistakes that I see that people are making, they're either through sins of omission or commission. They're either intentionally or they're just thoughtlessly sending out promotions that don't work. So I've been telling everybody, check your autoresponders, check your marketing automation. Probably you should pause it when we're in these seasons, and read the room. And it's a difficult and awkward time to be a marketer, but also this is the time when people are most aware. So I think, again, opposite ends of the spectrum, you got people who are just going nuts and not saying the right things. You also have people who are completely sitting on the sidelines and saying nothing. But you can't do that, right? Your job as a marketer is to advocate for your brand, for your company. And businesses need that right now. People still need to get paid. Landlords still need rents. So you can't just completely sit this one out. Your job is to figure out how, in light of everything that's going on, do we still do our jobs to the best of our abilities? And that's whether you're a marketer at a company or you're an agency or you're a founder, CEO like me who's doing a lot of the marketing and has to figure that out. But you can't just be silent. If you do that, your brand is not going to survive this time, especially this time when people are so looking for distraction. Their consumption is so far up.
And then how come when it comes to businesses, when things go bad, the first thing they look to cut is advertising, which is ludicrous because it's the thing they need the most, right? They need more customers coming in. Why is that always the first the first thing that people look to, like on the line sheet to cross off?
Yeah, as a practical matter, it's usually a big one, right? It's usually a big expense if a company is growing and if it's been in growth mode. Also, as a practical matter, it's something that you can cut without having to fire a bunch of people. Because for most businesses, payroll is their largest expense. People is their largest expense. Next to that is going to be marketing and advertising, R&D, all the investments in future stuff. And so I just think as a practical thing, it's just, we can cut this and make a really, really, really big difference. And look, there's some companies where they didn't have enough set back and they had to do that. I mean, I talked to some friends of mine who, they were like, what do I do? And I'm just talking about their numbers. And I was like, you cut every expense you can cut, including, what you're spending on Google and Facebook. And that really sucks because frankly, Facebook right now and Instagram are 40%, trading at a 40% discount. I know you know this during that season, and they missed out on it. And I said, you're going to miss out on it. And so ultimately, this comes down to businesses being managed correctly, which means managing cash flow appropriately. And so I tell businesses, if you don't have 90 days in operating cash set back, and then ideally leveraging that 90 days operating to go and get another 90 days, so you can have up to 6 months in a line of credit that you can tap so that during these times, you don't have to panic. We got it. We're going to invest. We're going to see how it goes. We can buy ourselves some time. Then you have no choice. I mean, it's if the answer is, cut marketing or fire everybody and shut down the business, I'd cut marketing too. So
how do you stay I said some nice things about you to start this off, that you were the GOAT, the Godfather, everything you paid me to say about you, I actually did say about you.
I only just recently, but here's how lame I am. I only just recently learned what GOAT stood for.
So before you knew that, it would have been an insult, right? Is he calling me an animal?
Well, it was always said I could tell like just contextually that it was nice, but I was like, this must be something new the kids are saying.
For the listeners, it's greatest of all time.
There you go.
GOAT. You definitely did not pay me to say these things about you, but how do you stay on top of things that are happening in the digital marketing world? I know it's your job, but for people who want to stay on top of things, how do you do that and stay on top of being a good leader and starting new companies and continue building and having the success you're having?
Just candidly, it's hard for me to stay on top of all the marketing trends because my day-to-day job is CEO. It's not marketer. I still subscribe to and read a lot of different email newsletters. Right?
And do you recommend?
Yeah. Gosh. Former employer, a former head of content, Russ Henneberry, has a newsletter called The Click.
Yep.
That's a daily, and that's CLIKK.com. Stacked Marketer is a really good one. We actually posted on the Digital Marketer blog newsletters that we read that aren't ours. Daily Carnage has a really good one. So Stack Marketer, Daily Carnage, Animals. I mentioned them earlier. Jimmy Daly has a really good one. But no, I mean, I read a ton. I bet I spend on average at least an hour to 2 hours just reading.
All marketing type books and business books?
I spend at least, it's all different types, but I bet at least 50% is marketing, just still because that's still kind of my day to day. But I usually wake up around 6 a.m. and I'll read from 6 to 7, o'clock in the morning, and then I'll read again throughout the day. On the weekends, so I said it's an average. There might be some days where I just can't, but on the weekends I'll read 4 and 5 hours. I'll plow through books and things like that. But so I read a lot. I really do. And I think that reading, whether it's books or newsletters, but I like to read newsletters and what people think. I'm less interested in the news type sites. So there's a lot of marketing sites out there that more break news on what's happening. I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in kind of what are some of the techniques. The main way that I stay on top of it though is we do it. Like we have a number of different businesses that we run, and just talking to the people who are running marketing there. We've got a channel, a Slack channel at our company called Marketing Ideas. And that's where everybody's sharing different ideas and, posting links. And so I go and scan that, but it's really hard to stay on top of it. It's easier for me to stay on top of kind of leadership, management, business stuff, because that's what I do every single day. And now when I go and read something, I've got an immediate application. So I tell people all the time, read a lot, consume a lot, but then say, how can I apply this? Because if you don't apply it fairly quickly, it's going to get forgotten. So, which doesn't mean you won't see it again and it won't come back around. I don't think people need to freak out about that, but read, not just for the purposes of, okay, that's good, but read always thinking, okay, now how can I go and apply something? Because that's when the learning gets ingrained.
So if you could pick, maybe 2 books from the past that had the biggest impact for you, and 2 recent books that you read that you're just like, this is going to have an impact on me, what would they be?
That's tough. That's like asking me to pick what my favorite children are. Because you see behind me, like
you have the answer to, but
yeah, on any given day it does change. Ready, Fire, Aim is an impactful book that I go back from from an entrepreneurship perspective, from a marketing perspective. It's written by Michael Masterson. Real name is Michael Ford. Mark Ford. There we go. Having a hard time with names and words today. I apologize. Yeah. So Mark Ford, pen name Michael Masterson, wrote a book, Ready, Fire, Aim. Phenomenal book for entrepreneurs getting started. Definitely kind of had a good process in place. He's one of the owners of Agora, which is one of the largest kind of direct response publishing companies in the world. So that book is great. Art of Profitability is another book that I go back and read fairly frequently. Lately, I've been reading more biographies. So I've read 2 biographies by about Teddy Roosevelt. So one of them was The Rise of Teddy Roosevelt, and the other was The River of Doubt. And I liked both of those because biography and listening to good, whether it's fiction or kind of historical fiction where there's a narrative aspect to it, just learning good storytelling is helpful. I'll go and look at my Kindle, see if there's any others that immediately jump.
And autobiographies I got turned on to because Roland Frazier was the one that told me. We had a whole conversation offline one day. He was like, read autobiographies, right? I want to hear from them. I want to hear all about them. And he's very big on that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so those are the ones that, lately, because I've been reading biographies, there's a book, University of Berkshire Hathaway, because a lot of what we're doing right now is kind of more on the mergers and acquisition side of things. So I'm probably reading a lot more Munger and Buffett than a marketer should. But yeah, so those are the books that have been on my list.
And then how do you, being the thought leader you are, differentiate your thoughts from other people? I know there are some people who read things and then they're afraid to speak out about it because, at what point do you not be the sponge, right? You follow so many different people listening follow you, follow other marketers. At what point do their ideas not become a sponge of other people?
Oh, they do. They always do. I think I posted something on Twitter the other day because I forget what the instance was, but I said, every time I think I have an original thought, I go back and read a great book from a couple of years ago, and there it is. So I'm always very, I've done it a couple of times just on this show so far. I like to give credit where credit is due. I found I've never, it's never been a status, deprecation and status to give somebody else credit for their idea. But what I do is I take all these different ideas and I do this just by myself. Like, I create my own systems and frameworks so that it makes sense to me. Because just hearing somebody else's ideas, like the way that I learn is, and this is kind of a tip for anybody, I go out and I read the 5 best-known, best-selling books on a given subject. And I used to do 10. And what I found is that, like, it became so similar, 5 was enough. That was kind of the minimum viable dose, I guess. But I'd start with 5 and I would read the first one and I'd read the second one. I'd say, okay, where do they agree? Where do they disagree? Read another one. Where does everybody seem to be agreeing? Where do people seem to be disagreeing? And the areas where everybody kind of agrees, I'm just going to accept that as a best practice. I don't need to reinvent that. In the areas where people disagree, that's where I'm going to seek to explore and come up with my own kind of my own ideas, my own perceptions. And all you need is a nuance and a tweak to a collection of existing ideas, and that's original thought as far as I'm concerned. So I do that, and I develop and synthesize it into my own ideas, and I start talking about it. And so I use Twitter a lot to test ideas. So I'll say, here's this, and I'll get feedback. People say, I disagree, that's stupid. Here's where you're wrong. If you're going to put yourself out there, if you're going to be a thought leader, you have to be okay with people coming out and telling you that you're wrong. You have to be okay with people just hating on you because you just bothered to, poke your head above the surface. Australians call it tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with it, that's fine. You don't have to be the celebrity. You don't have to be the product. I would much rather, I way more enjoy being the CEO than the product. I mean,
two guys that I see do it perfectly are like Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone. The way they speak with like absolute certainty, like you can't disagree with me, right? Like this is the 100% way to do this, right? Like,
yeah, they speak only in absolutes.
Yeah.
And if you want to build authority, speak in absolutes. If you want to be accurate, then hedge. I have a hard time balancing that. I really do. Like I've got a lot of respect for both Gary and Grant. I don't want to do what they do, and I don't have to. I've done just fine. I think it's important to remember that you kind of got to decide: are you going to be the show, or are you going to be the advertiser? Right? If business today, social, if the world today is reality TV, right? Which it kind of is, right? Everything's reality TV today. You've got to decide: do you want to be the show? Do you want to be the talent? Or do you want to be the advertiser? I've kind of made the decision that by and large, I want to be the advertiser. I will make cameo appearances, pop into somebody else's thing, and then get the heck out. Because I think that comes down to just being self-aware. I don't think you have to do what Gary does. I don't think you have to do what Grant does. But I'll tell you, if you're going to go head to head against them, you better bring it.
Well said. We're going to end with this. Last year when I had you on, I had you end with the State of the Union for digital marketing. So the podium's yours again. It's now a year later. We're in the midst of the world being shaken, whatever way, for good, for bad, pandemic. What's the state of digital marketing today?
Digital marketing is more important than ever. If you look at a world where people either can't go outside or are afraid to go outside, or they're less trusting of their neighbors or the person down the street, they're going to go online. We're to the extent that everything goes back to normal, right? And different people believe that that's going to happen to a different degree and over a different time span. But whatever degree or time span that you believe that's going to happen, when/if we emerge from this, it is going to be an entire population that has gotten comfortable with Zoom, that has gotten comfortable with digital communication, with buying online. They had no choice. So we are now fully in a digital first world, in a digital first economy. It was happening. We were basically already there. And this was just the thing that tipped the last remaining stagnants off of the edge. And so whether, what it looks like in restaurants and mask wearing and things like that, I don't know. What I do know is that we are definitely living in a digital first world now moving forward, and I don't ever see it going back, which means as a marketer, there really is no distinction between marketing and digital marketing. I think even the name digital marketer is going to be somewhat passe at some point, sooner rather than later, because all marketing has gone digital. So get comfortable with it if you weren't already, and know that if you are there, you're going to have to be even better because everybody else is in it too.
Love it. Ryan, you're someone that I've been following for a long time, someone I continuously look up to, someone that when it comes from me trying to upskill and learn from, you're the first name that comes to mind, and I try to do it. That you've seen me in your communities. I try to learn from you as much as possible. I appreciate not only the friendship that's forming here, but you taking your time and coming here and helping out all the people that are listening and providing value. And you do that daily. So just as a digital marketer, or I should say as a marketer, because we now got rid of that term, thank you so much for doing this.
Jason, thanks so much for having me.